Okay, hi, my name is Blake Robbins. I am one of this year's programmers for the feature film section of the Bend Film Festival. And I am so grateful and blessed to be here with Takeshi KUSHIDA, all the way from Japan, correct?
Yeah, I'm in Tokyo now.
Tokyo, fantastic. So I'm not sure, but this may be our first international Q&A. When I was programming the festival and you know, in the middle of the night watching films as I do when the kids are all asleep, I came across your movie Woman of the Photographs, and I have to tell you, it stuck with me for months. I I I absolutely loved it, and I couldn't be more excited to talk to the writer director of said movie, Takeshi KUSHIDA.
Thank you so much.
I think the first thing I want to ask you about is if you could give us the abbreviated version of your journey as a filmmaker, as a writer. I believe this is your first feature film.
It is, yes.
And maybe you could tell us, did you go to film school? What was your training? What brought you from to the moment where you've made this movie?
I went to film school in United Kingdom, and which was called Kent Institute of Art and Design, and I learned experimental films, and I was not making narrative film, and this is my first narrative feature film, and I hope you enjoyed it. My previous works are dance films without dialogue. And there is my previous short film that lead us to create Woman of the Photographs. The title of short film is Voice, and that was made by same actors and same staffs. So I knew that the actors and the staffs have great skills, and it's my pleasure that I could show Woman of the Photographs at Bend Film Festival.
Okay, so that leads me directly into a couple of other questions. So when I was watching the film, I'm gonna jump around a little bit here. It appeared to me that the story was told for these specific actors. Like any great film, when you get to the finished film, you hope that the characters and the actors feel like the film was written specifically for them. In this case, it actually was.
Yeah, it was. I decided the cast just after making short synopsis and before making it into a script, because I would like to imagine how the characters look like when I am writing a script. And when I make a film, I always pay attention to have a good subject. And since this subject is found, my challenge begins in order to make it into the images, which has cinematic pleasure. Although it is difficult to explain what cinematic pleasure is in words, but I believe that it is a moment that the audience feels the emotional connection with the characters on screen. So I think the characters are the most important part of the film. So I prefer to decide the actors before writing a screenplay.
That's interesting. Just a personal note about my own writing. I always have to cast the movie in my head as I write it, whether I cast them from actors I know or people from my life. Whether those actors end up ever playing the parts, I can't start writing until I know who I'm writing for. So I can identify with that approach to storytelling. I'm going to go back to an earlier question because I'm interested. what was the creative impulse to tell this story, the story that deals with you know, the social media presence in our lives, which I love how you handled, and I'll get to that in a later question. The man who is basically isolated, living a solitary, I would almost say it's a life of an observer as opposed to a participant. But what was going on in your mind creatively that became the seed for the story? I can very much tell that your interest is in the characters, but there is enough of a story, enough of a through line with these two people, and even the gentleman who visits him. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that creative process, why you wrote the story for the characters.
Yes, I was inspired to make a film about the relationship between a woman and photographs 10 years ago. There was an accident in 10 years ago. At that time, I was making a poster for cosmetics advertisement with Japanese actress. And she was obsessed with retouching her image. She had her exclusive retoucher, and she told him to make her eyes bigger, remove her necklines, remove the waist. And finally, she changed her face and the body totally different from real herself with the help of retoucher. She looked very happy with the result at that time, but she quit the actress after 2 years. She didn't tell us why she quit the actress, but I thought that she couldn't keep doing the actress because she confused the reality and the imagination. She was successful to change herself to be liked by a lot of people. But as a result, she lost who she really is. And that kind of case was only for exceptional people like models, actors, singers 10 years ago. But now a lot of women are changing their figures in photographs on SNS by using retouching applications and filters. So I decided to make a film about women and photographs now.
It all makes sense. One of the reasons I said I was so glad to talk to you is because you've made a film that's so rich and multidimensional and so layered and so specific that it really helps. I really love to have the backstory to how what I'm watching on the screen became what I was in fact watching on the screen. And one of the things that as a programmer, I love programming for Ben Film Festival is it's a very adventurous audience who's really looking for new films and new storytellers and very much interested in the ideas. So you talked about the manipulation of the image that we're using to portray ourselves, which has become so common in social media. Now, we live a lie. The lie is the propaganda that we put forward, and you can manipulate it. And we're manipulating these images more than ever in the history. You know, I read something about more photographs will be taken in the next year than in all of human history prior. Yeah, everyone has the film, the ability to take a photograph, but now they don't only have the ability to take the photograph, but to manipulate the photograph. Everyone's become a Photoshop expert, and the filters. You know, it wasn't enough just to have the image. Now we have to have control over the image. So I thought you, in a very, very interesting way, as a programmer, I've seen the idea of social media handled in a lot of new films. And typically, when social media is addressed on film in the last 2 or 3 years, I predominantly see the voice of judgment and condemnation. This is primarily what I see as the director's take on that social media is bad, that it interrupts our lives, that we are at a lack of intimacy. All of these things are very, I think, safe. And to me, they become a symptom of something bigger, which I think your movie handled the something bigger, which is maybe it's about a relationship to ourselves and a relationship to others, and how we now put that through the prism of social media. But one of the reasons I loved your film is it shows a woman manipulating herself through social media, but it doesn't do so with a heavy-handed condemnation of her for doing so. In fact, it explores both ideas of, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing, or is this just how things are now? So I wanted you to talk to me a little bit about your ideas that went into the approach to portraying social media use on film.
Yeah, I think what social media is encouraging us to do is making 10,000 friends. And it seems like people are acting idealized themselves on social media to be liked by a large number of people. And I personally think we don't have true selves anyway. We all have to act multiple selves to live. Like when I meet my mother, I act like a son. And when I talk to you, I act like a filmmaker. And it is fine as long as I'm performing multiple selves to satisfy myself. Sometimes it helps me to like myself. But it is problematic if I create multiple selves in SNS just for increasing the number of likes. Because if I pursue the number, I cannot see the relationship with other people. And I may not be able to see the emotional status of myself. I think that we all have to perform multiple selves because we can only feel our existence through the relationship with the others. But we shouldn't pursue a number because who I have to love first is myself to be happy.
Yeah, it certainly comes through in your film. I think that touches on what I liked about your approach. Our relationship to social media is the symptom, not the disease. Yeah. The disease is, how do we feel about ourselves in any given moment? And where do we get that feeling? Do we get it internally or externally? I guess I didn't ask a question, but I guess you agree that that was sort of the larger takeaway of how you handled that. Because stories are a timestamp most often of the moment we're in today, and I loved your film for the timestamp it created. It was very compelling to me.
Yeah, and what I am afraid of is, as I told you, so many pictures are taken now and retouched. And scary thing is maybe 10 years later and they see the picture of now, they cannot tell whether it's retouched or real. And that's more scary thing, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you talked earlier about your process and how you went to film school and your initial maybe, I don't know, baby steps into filmmaking or initial step into filmmaking was this alternative filmmaking,
Yes.
this, dance and things. So a couple of things were also immediately apparent to me as a filmmaker that I admired, and I wanted to ask you about them specifically. One is sound design. Um, from the anyone who's watched the film will recognize the immediate ambient sound of the insects in the very opening scene, and then you go into his office and there's this quiet. And to me, that's storytelling. And then the relationship of insects in the story, where we end up with the praying mantis and his relationship to being in a cage. At least that I saw that is his relationship with the praying mantis is he's in his cage and the praying mantis is in its cage,
Yeah.
and then there's the relationship with the woman. But his fascination with bugs, which allows him again to continue to be an observer, and his and I definitely have to get to the fact that he only has one line in the whole movie, a protagonist. That feels very, it's a narrative storytelling, which I loved and created a tension for me, and actually just made the movie more unique and more interesting, and just an interesting character that he would only have this one line. But with regard to the ambient, the sounds, also the sound of him photoshopping just the squeaking of the pen as he erased some lines. These were, and it wasn't, and it felt stylized, but right to the edge. It felt elevated, but right to the edge where it didn't take me out of the story. It just kind of created the world for me and made things more elevated, more they drew my attention more specifically. And I think maybe for non-filmmakers watching the movie, it will happen on a more unconscious level. For me, I was very conscious of it because, I recognize, my own work with sound design. But talk to me about the creative process. Did this happen in the writing? Did this happen in the execution? Did you know from the beginning you were layering in these sounds when you created this world? What was the filmmaking journey with sound design?
Sound design. In this film, all the sound is added afterwards, like creating music. Because I want to open the audience ears. We see music in quiet place, but we don't listen to our what can I say? The sound of footsteps seriously, but I think that's something unnatural because everything is a sound, and we can enjoy every sound. So, and I think in cinema it's a quiet place, and I want audience to enjoy the sound of footsteps and sound of clothes, because like music, our sound of footsteps and clothes can express the feeling. And I wanted to emphasize the sound which is generated by the character's movement more than voice, because I think we can tell whether a man is in good mood or angry with the sound of footsteps rather than his voice.
I agree. I noticed it. I thought this filmmaker loves sounds and recognizes the emotional impact of sound, and has used sound as the score of this film along with the actual score. In fact, I thought oftentimes sound design took the forefront of score, and they worked in cohesion, in conjunction with each other, and it drove me more into the world that you built, but also very much made the loneliness, the isolation, all the little nuances of character more real for me. It was an emotional experience that I had because of your use of sound. So I mentioned it, and anyone who's seen the film has probably noticed it. Talk to me about having a protagonist, the lead in your movie, who's in every scene, whose journey we follow. Only have one line in the whole movie, and it's at the very end of the film. Did it start out that way? Did you discover it that way? Obviously, it was written that he didn't have much to say, but when what was that like? Tell me about the decision to not have your protagonist speak until the end.
I made the photographer silent in order to make him look like an honest person. Because I believe that the body expression and the sound generated by him, they are more honest than the words. And I like silent films, and cinema has a history of 120 years. But still, I think the most sympathy-inviting character in cinematic history is Charlie Chaplin. So it tells me that we don't need a voice or lines in order to tell the emotion to the audience.
But you did have him say something.
Yeah.
And so
yeah.
By saying that something, you elevated that something you wanted to say. It stood out from everything that wasn't said. So tell me what you wanted to have him say.
Sorry, you are talking about the last line he spoke? Yeah. In the end, he has to confess because he's quiet, and until the end, he doesn't show his emotion much. But in the end, I thought he has to confess that he found the ultimate pleasure of life. Then, because he thought that he can be accepted by women by saying his line. And that was why I decided him to speak.
Yes, and it was very, very, very effective. I see that we're running up to about 20 minutes. I think it's best to keep these close to 20 minutes so that more people will click on them. I could talk to you for an hour about your film. Maybe we'll do that another time. But, and just wrapping up, and we've touched on a lot of things. You know, you've made such an interesting film in such an interesting way. That the conversation really could be, you know, and that's the beauty of finding films for film festivals, is that I think a successful film is one that you can't put down after you've seen it. You need to talk about it with others. You need to, you know, so I'm glad the audiences at Bend will get a chance, and hopefully they'll be able to talk to others. And in spite of our comments about social media, there is a positive, and one of the positives is you can track people whose work you care about, that you believe in, that you like. So if you have some social media, maybe you could share it with us, just, you know, whether it be a Twitter or an Instagram page, so I personally and anyone else watching can follow you, follow what you do next. Also, if you could maybe tell me what's next for you, or what's next for the film, or both, whatever you may be able to speak about.
Yes, I am working on my next feature film. Next film is about a story of dentist, because the tooth pain is common throughout the world. And I want to make a film which can be shared by people with different country, different language, different culture, and different race. And so, and you know, the sound of the dentist can tell the same emotion.
where can we follow you so we can find out when this next film is ready to be filmed?
Where?
Yeah,
Where?
social media.
Yeah. I'm doing Facebook and Twitter. I will send you the links later.
So if I put your name into Facebook and Twitter, I can find you now that I know what you look like?
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you again. What time is it where you're at?
7:24 in the morning, Friday. Very early.
Thanks again for your beautiful film. I wish you all the success in the world with not only this film, but future films. A really big fan, and I look forward to seeing more of your work, Takashi.
Thank you very much.